Disney World! Again! Hey there, it's Elisa, but of course you can call me Ellie. I tend to overplan a little bit when it comes to vacation. So that's what I've been busy with for the past few months. I feel like I've been planning this vacation forever, but I also feel like I have not had enough time to get everything ready. You may have seen my little vlog series for my solo trip that I took last summer for my birthday. If you did watch that, thank you so much. I do appreciate the views. And for those of you who haven't watched those videos, or if you have and you just want to watch them again, I am going to link the playlist down in the description box below, so go ahead and check that out. This time I will be doing things a little bit differently. I'm going to be traveling with my cousin, and I do want to spend time with him and enjoy the time that we're down there together, enjoying the parks that we love. And I don't really want to spend too much time worried about camera angles or lighting or trying to get the perfect shot or figuring out what to say. So I'm not necessarily going to be vlogging this trip, but I do want to share my experience with you. So I am going to be uploading kind of my planning process and reviews of the trip after I get back. I am so excited to go back to Orlando. So much has changed since the last time I was there, even over the past few months. And there are some things that I know are going to change after we leave. So whenever the next time is that I go back to Orlando, I'm probably going to have completely different experiences, which is part of the nice thing about Disney parks. They're always changing, but that does mean you kind of need to know what you're getting yourself into at the time that you're going, or at least if you want to be way too overinformed like I do. Now, there's a lot that goes into planning a Disney vacation, especially if you do it like me, where every little detail is thought out. There are some big key items that I've been needing to keep in mind from the very beginning of my planning process. Now, of course, there's the normal stuff that everybody plans. Itinerary, where to stay when we're there, budgeting, normal things that everybody has to do for every trip. There's also going to be a few key things that are specific to my trip at this specific time that I'm keeping in mind. Like, for example, COVID mandates. The last time I went to Disney World in July of 2021, there were a few policies to keep in mind, both in the parks and just for the greater Orlando area in general. Plus, I think there were still some national mandates, like masks on public transportation. Now when I'm going in the middle of September of 2022, we don't have to worry about that. So for this next trip, we're not going to have to worry about masks or social distancing like I had to for my last trip last year, unless something drastically changes in the next few days. I don't have to worry about standing in certain spots in line or worrying about those weird plexiglass walls that would encase us as we were waiting in the queues that were just terrible. Understandably necessary, but not comfortable. Everything is pretty much back to normal as much as it can be at this point. One nice thing about not having to worry about social distancing is not only does this affect me directly as a park goer, but that also means that characters don't have to socially distance either. So for those character meet and greets, we're going to be able to walk right up to them and give them a great big hug, just how Walt Disney intended. Another thing that I'm keeping in mind for this trip are tickets and reservations. Now, the park reservation system that I used last time in July is still in effect. I think a lot of people were hoping that after the 2020 stuff started dying down, that those park reservation requirements would go away. But it seems like park reservations are here to stay, so in addition to purchasing a ticket, I do have to indicate ahead of time which park I'm going to be in and which day so that I can reserve my spot in those parks. And also my cousins. Park hopping does start at 2 p.m. every day, which means that you can move to a different park that you didn't originally reserve. But for this trip, we didn't get park hopping passes anyways, so that doesn't really affect us directly. Although it might affect our overall experience since the crowd in the second part of the day is probably going to be different than the crowd in the first part of the day for the park that we're going to be at, since people are going to be able to move back and forth between parks after 2 p.m. The park hours are going to be a little bit different this trip. The last time I went in July of 2021, the park hours were still pretty short. They were really trying to restrict how much time everybody had in contact with each other in the parks every day, just to keep everybody safe and healthy. Now the parks are open for a little bit longer, not by too much though. I still feel like park hours aren't as long as they would have been maybe like 5 years ago, but we'll definitely be able to stay in the parks longer than we would have this time last year, or at least at the time of my last trip in July. There's also extra hours available to certain resort guests that we're going to be taking advantage of. If you had gone to Disney World in previous years, you might remember something like extra magic hours that were an extra period of time that resort guests got in the parks. So you could come a little earlier, stay a little bit later. They kind of have that available now, but it's just an extra 30 minutes before the park opens. 30 minutes really isn't that much, but it is what it is, and it's available, I think, to everybody that stays at a Disney World resort, and then there's like a couple other hotels that offer the same thing. We are going to be staying at a deluxe resort, which means that we're also going to have access to extended evening hours. That time is a little bit longer, but it's only at certain parks and only on certain nights. I think it's mostly just Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and there's like one extended evening hours night for the week for Magic Kingdom, and then one extended evening hours night for Epcot for the week, and then that seems to be it. And it's honestly really hard to find on the website for what hours are available for what parks, for what guests, and for what attractions, because not every attraction is available for these extra hours. So it can get a little bit confusing. I think I have it figured out for this trip, but it did take me a while. But that has factored into my entire plan for the whole trip, making sure that I'm going to the right park on the right day when there's those certain hours available, and then figuring out which rides to go on during what times to accommodate those hours. Genie Plus is also now a thing. It's a whole other section of the My Disney Experience app. The My Disney Experience app was available when I went in July, but not Genie Plus. I'm a little intimidated, but I think I'm prepared, or at least as much as I can. There's so much to know about Genie Plus and the My Disney Experience app. So much to know. Just know that I know that Genie Plus is a thing, and I am planning to use it for this upcoming trip. Some other things that are going to be a little bit different for this specific trip for me, as opposed to other trips I have already or will be taking, is the off-site transportation. For my last trip to Walt Disney World, there was still something called the Magical Express, which was included in the cost of your stay for all Disney Resort guests. And as long as you reserved a ticket, they had a shuttle system that would take you from the airport to your resort, and then once you were done from the resort, back to the airport. Now that's not even available. There are still transportation options getting you between the Walt Disney World property and the Orlando International Airport, but you have to pay for them separately, and they are operated by a third party. I think the most common ones to use would be either Mears Connect, which is actually the system that provided the Magical Express before. It's just now they're not technically part of Disney anymore. And then a newer system called Sunshine Flyers, which is a similar system. It's just a different company. And then of course there's the regular like taxi, Uber, Lyft, that sort of thing. If you're wondering, I decided to go with the Mears Connect option since it's basically Magical Express, just not with Disney stickers on it anymore. I felt more comfortable using that since I'm kind of familiar with the process already. And it is costing me $32 round trip. Food and dining is going to be pretty much the same for this trip as it was for my July trip last year. Disney World back in the day used to have like this dining plan, like prepay system. That's gone. I don't think anybody thinks that's ever coming back. I have been trying to stay updated with food and dining news though, just in case that changed, but unfortunately it seems like we're just gonna have to buy meals while we're there, just like normal people at a normal park. It's not the worst thing in the world, although it does make budgeting a little bit trickier since we won't know how much money we're spending on food until we've already spent it. I do think that the time frame to make dining reservations might have changed since my last trip, so I know that for this next trip that the dining reservations are available 60 days in advance starting at 6 a.m. Eastern time for online reservations, and then over the phone bookings start at 7 a.m. Eastern time on that same day. I know a few years ago that you could book dining reservations 180 days in advance. Now it's down to 60, which is still pretty far out, but definitely a lot more reasonable in my opinion. I have a hard time deciding what to eat even like 20 minutes before I eat. Make me decide 60 days in advance? That's a lot to ask for. But some of these sit-down restaurants in the parks, man, people have that ready to go right away. Those reservations get booked up within minutes. So if you don't have your alarm set and you're ready to go, you're not going to get that reservation that 60 days out. There were a couple though that I missed out on, and that's okay. I know that there's some mobile apps out there and maybe some websites that you can actually pay for a service. They'll keep an eye on reservation availability and then reach out to you if something opens up. But these other reservations that I didn't get, I'm not too worried about. But as I'm planning, I have been keeping in mind what the food and dining experience is probably going to look like while we're down there, and that does affect my overall planning. And if you're a little bit of a Disney park nerd like me, then you might also be trying to keep in mind some of those other rides and park updates. Definitely try to look into what rides might be closed while you're there for your trip. Theme park rides are just like any other machine. They need maintenance. Sometimes they need some refurbishment. So periodically through the year, there are going to be rides that are not available because they're down for maintenance. So as we're getting closer to the time of my trip, I'm making sure that I'm keeping in mind any kind of ride closures that might be happening. As far as I'm aware, the only thing that's going to be unavailable while we're there is the railroad in Magic Kingdom. That was also closed during my last trip. Epcot is also under a big remodel right now. There are still some projects that are being worked on. So I know that when we enter into the Epcot park, there's still going to be some construction zones and some temporary walls that we have to walk around. And the park just isn't going to be as pretty as it will be in, say, like 5 years or something. But a lot of the construction projects have finished since the last time I was there. So I'm hoping that it'll be a little less construction-y and a little bit more open and finished looking for this next trip. Also, the Tower of Terror ride in Hollywood Studios isn't going to be completely down, but they are renovating one half of the ride at a time currently. There's usually 2 sides that are simultaneously running, but now there's just going to be one side open at a time, which means it can take half the amount of people at a time than it would have previously. So while I know we can still ride that ride while we're there, the wait times are going to be significantly longer. Now, I know that I said earlier that most shows and parades and everything is back open. There is one big one that still hasn't come back yet, and that's the nighttime spectacular at Hollywood Studios, Fantasmic. As far as I'm aware, Fantasmic will not be available for my next trip. There's also going to be some events happening while we're at Walt Disney World to keep in mind. Epcot's International Food and Wine Festival is happening this year between July 14th and November 19th. So we're gonna get there right in the middle of it, and I am so excited to see all of the new food booths in Epcot offering their international foods and wines. That's like all the best things put together: food, wine, and Disney. How can you get better than that? Since the Halloween season starts really early in Orlando, and it starts earlier and earlier every year, Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party will be happening while we're there. So Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party is a separate event held on certain evenings. It's like a Magic Kingdom Halloween party, basically. My cousin and I will not be attending that party, but we do need to keep it in mind because Magic Kingdom does close early on the nights of those parties to get ready for those parties later that evening. I have a little list of notes in my phone that I've been keeping open and readily available, so whenever I hear any new news about the Disney parks that's going to affect my trip, or when I'm scheduling the itinerary, I can have all of that information right in front of me so I don't forget anything. So yeah, a lot to keep in mind. Sorry, I just rambled off for like however long. I just figured I would share with you the information that I've been trying to keep in mind. There is still a lot more that goes into my planning process for getting ready for a Walt Disney World trip, but we'll go over that later. You've listened to my rantings enough. I really do love going to Disney World, and I could talk about it all day if you let me.